Hi, I'm Susan. Welcome to my new chess improvement video series. This is volume 1, and the topic in this volume is chess openings from White's perspective. And specifically, I chose the London system, and in this volume we'll only discuss variations where Black responds with e6 or d5, but not fianchettoing the bishop with g6. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not a big supporter of studying much openings unless you're a professional player or at least rated around 2000. I think it's a lot more important to understand the spirit of the opening, the motives, the ideas, the plans, the tricks, what to play for, what tricks not to fall for. And that will be my approach in this video and the ones coming. Well, with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, so the way I like to learn a new opening is that I look at some very typical games to understand the ideas on what to play for, what the plan should be, what to be afraid of threats of the opponent. And that's why I like to show you, just to start with, a couple so-called appetizers, games that hopefully give you appetite to learn further about this opening. I really enjoy them when I've seen it. Okay, so let's get started. So the London system basically reflects an opening system where White starts the game with d4 and then will put the bishop on f4, either on the second move or on the third move. So Black actually can play a lot of different moves, but most commonly Black would play either d5, like in the first sample game we're about to see, or knight f6. So in this game Black played d5 and White played knight f3. It's true we could play bishop f4 right away as well, but it's more common to play developing the knight first. And now Black has a big crossroad, whether to develop the bishop on f8 to g7, fianchettoing it, or to the other diagonal, as we shall see in this game. Black played e6, and here we are in the London system, bishop f4. So the advantage is obvious compared to playing e3, when we would lock in our bishop being less active. So that's why we're trying to get our bishop out now to f4. And Black here can play again knight f6 or developing the bishop, but in this game Black played c5, which is a certainly decent move, normal move. And now White plays c3, very typical response. Black played knight c6, e3, very typical setup that we see, that White puts this little kind of pawn triangle here with these 3 pawns and develops the knight and the bishop, light squared bishop behind it. So Black played knight f6, knight d2, bishop e7, and bishop d3. Okay, so these were the first basic developing moves, and here comes a move that's very common by club players, that they would play c4, advancing the c-pawn, attacking the bishop, thinking they are gaining a tempo and gaining space. Yet the problem is that when Black will castle to the king's side after closing the center completely, White gets a free hand on the king's side of the board and often develops a very, very dangerous attack, as we will see in this game as well. So White played bishop c2, and at this point, unlike what I usually recommend, you need to castle as soon as you can in the opening. In this case, since Black already made a mistake by playing c4, in this case castling is actually following up somewhat on that mistake. It was better to immediately try to play b5 and create a queenside march with the pawns. But let's see, why is it a mistake? how to punish it. White continues with a very, very typical move again for the London system, especially when black plays with e6 and bishop e7. You will see that when the bishop develops fianchettoing to g7, everything is very different. But for now, we're staying with this type of positions. So knight e5, that's the very typical move that gains space, puts the knight into a better position, and not less importantly, opens the diagonal of the queen to come out and attack the king's side. So now black can take on e5, which black did in this particular game we're looking at, which has been played by Velazquez versus Acosta. Black took on e5. But let's see what would happen if black kind of plays a little passively with bishop d7, continues developing, and then trying to push the b pawn up to get counterplay. Well, white would continue with the attack. Actually, white can choose to attack with the pawns. b5, g4, b4. Now we can notice how safe, completely safe, the white king is on e1 because the center is completely closed. It's pretty impossible for black to open up the e file or the d5 center files against white's king. So white would proceed with the pawn march, attacking the black knight. If you look carefully, you'll see that the only place to go back to without losing material is going back to e8. And now white is ready to come with an amazing combination to win the game. Bishop h7, sacrificing the bishop, king takes, and then immediately sacrificing the knight as well. So now we can see the white queen coming to h5 next, whether black takes the knight or not. Queen h5 check. King needs to go back. We're following it up with a pawn push. Now if the rook would move away somewhere, obviously we are checkmating simply in just 2 moves. Or if after g6 black tries to play knight f6, then the queen, it's attacked, true, but the queen doesn't need to move. But first we will capture the rook with a check on f7, and then the queen can just move away. And we can see that white's attack is absolutely devastating. White can, for example, come here, next move with the rook, and then checkmate on g7. Black is hopeless. So let's go back all the way to this position when we just played the knight to e5, and black in the game, to avoid what we've just seen, takes on e5. So now this is a critical moment. What should we take back with? Should we take back with the pawn or the bishop? Generally, in the London system, we almost always take back with the pawn. Why? So we can chase the knight away from f6, which is a key defending piece of black's king side and black's king. So unfortunately for black again, the knight cannot go forward. If it would go to e4, obviously it would lose a pawn right away. So the knight went to d7 in this game. And again, white is starting the pawn march with h4. There's a very interesting variation what would happen if black carelessly again would try to counterattack on the other side of the board. Amazingly, even though white already doesn't have one of the knights, and the second knight seems to be a little far from black's king, white is ready to sacrifice again the bishop on h7. Pretty impressive. It is impressive because after takes and check and king g8, white needs to make now a quiet move. Typically, in order for such combinations to work, already at this point, the white knight would be ready to jump to g5, not here. In this case, the white knight moves to f3 first, and even though white now threatens knight g5, and black has a full move to do whatever they want. They cannot properly defend against that dangerous threat. So black plays f6, which seemingly stops the knight from coming there, but not for real. The knight can go to g5 anyway. Pretty amazing. The threat is pretty clear with queen h7. Therefore, black has no choice but to take. But then what happens is white opens the h-file by capturing simply back with the pawn. And now the white rook connects with the white queen on the h-file and creates dangerous threats. For example, if black would just kind of make a random move like b4, the simplest thing that white could do is just play g6, making sure that the black king doesn't escape on f7, and then just checkmate with the queen either on h7 or h8. So therefore, black can try to play now rook to f5 to pin along the 5th rank the pawn, so the white pawn cannot move up now to g6. However, white can continue just simply checking, and after king f7, checking again, king e8, and simply taking the pawn on g7. It's not just about taking the pawn, but more importantly, opening the h-file, so now the white rook is threatening to come in. So the rook could come in to h8. Also, believe it or not, the g6 pawn may promote after the queen would move out of its way. So black, let's say, plays bishop f8, queen g8, knight c5, g4, and basically the black rook is trapped on top of all the other problems that black is facing. White is in a winning position. Let's go back again to earlier stage in the game, move 11, where black, to prevent all this, perhaps black feared of something similar happening, and that's why played f5, preventing the bishop sacrifice on h7. So now white needs to improve the position further before continuing with the attack directly. And white played knight f3, improving the position of the knight. It's kind of a positional move, aiming to this beautiful square right here on d4 for the knight. So after knight f3, black played knight c5, which is perhaps not the best move. Black may have been better trying to get counterplay with queen b6, trying to create some attack on the pawn on b2. So came knight to c5, and now white played queen e2. Why? The idea of the move is to prepare the possibility for the white king to castle to the queen side. Black responded with a5, and white centralized the knight to a beautiful outpost on d4. Also, at the same time, it prepares white's next move. Black played h6, and white played g4. This is one of those situations that's a dream position for white, an attack where it's one-sided. Basically, white is attacking, and black cannot do too much, not much counterplay, and it's pretty much an unstoppable type of attack. If black now would kind of ignore the situation and play bishop d7, white would continue by opening the g-file, then following up with queen f3, aiming at the center pawn on d5, knight e4, white castles. The purpose of castling in this case is not so much to put the king to a safer place, since it already was in a reasonably safe place, but more so to connect the rooks and to available for white's queenside rook to enter the attack on the g-file on the king side, as we shall see in the next move. And in the meantime, the king conveniently also protects this pawn on b2. So rook g1, a4, a3, stopping black's pawn advance. King moves out of the g-file, queen g2, putting more pressure on the g7 pawn. Rook g8, and now an important move, e6, disconnecting the queen from protecting the king's side, and black cannot capture because queen g6, and then bishop takes h6, and white attacks, win. Going back to the position after g4, in the game black took on h4, white took on f5, pawn took back, and white castle. White is not much concerned that they lost the pawn on h4. They are more than happy to sacrifice that pawn in order to open the h-file for white's rook. These type of sacrifices are very common when you're attacking and well worth the material sacrifice. Black played knight e4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and rook dg1. We can see how all the white pieces are aiming towards the king's side, and the black king is in a hopeless situation. Now white is threatening moves like bishop takes pawn, or queen h5, and such. Black responded with bishop g5 when white took, and after queen h5, black resigned because everything is falling apart. Okay. So this was the first game that's a very typical game, very beautiful attack. Everything worked out great from white's perspective.